What is a brick? A piece of building material that you use to lay one on top the other until you construct something new, something amazing. What's a BRICS country? Well, the short version is that these are countries that were once very much developing countries, but now have developed so much that you really can't call them developing countries anymore. And in particular, BRICS here is spelled BRICS. BRICS. And it represents Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And our newest miniseries on BRICS countries and how they're doing development-wise kicks off today. And for each of these countries, we're going to be looking at political and economic development data. Things like GDP, GDP per capita, and Gini, all coming from the World Bank. And we're going to look at the Human Development Index, HDI, coming from the United Nations. And we're going to look at organizations like Transparency International, Reporters Without Borders, and Freedom House. And all of these different development variables, we're going to look at together to see just how well these BRICS countries are doing today. And today, we start with Brazil. So let's go. And let's go ahead and do GDP first, aka Gross Domestic Product, the accumulation of the selling of all goods and services in a country for a single calendar year. And this gives us a general idea of how large a country's economy is, as measured in US dollars. And Brazil in 2000 had a GDP of $655 billion. By 2021, $1.6 trillion. That's a growth rate just under 3 times the 2000 GDP level. I mean, that's really good growth over a 22-year period. However, when you look closely at the data, 2011, that was the peak year. That was the year that Brazil's economy did the best, with a GDP of $2.6 trillion, meaning that 10 years since then, the economy has shrunk by $1 trillion. It means hard times. But still, the 2021 GDP makes Brazil the number 12 in the world for the largest economy. The 12th largest economy in the world, people. Hell yeah, Brazil's a BRICS country for sure. But let's look at GDP per capita, where we take that GDP and divide it by the population of the country to give us the average of how much a person in the country would make if income was equally distributed amongst the people. In 2000, Brazil had a GDP per capita of $3,700 per person per year. In 2021, a GDP per capita of $7,500 a year per person. GDP per capita doubles over the 22-year period, which is good. But again, in 2011, it was up to over $13K per person per year. So the economy has still not recovered and built itself back up to that 2011 spot. It's seen it in GDP and GDP per capita. And globally, though, the 2021 GDP per capita puts Brazil right around the 100th place, meaning the 50% mark of all countries in the world. That's a major difference in global rankings from GDP to GDP per capita, going from number 12 to number 100 about. But GDP per capita is an imperfect measure of income for sure. It assumes income's equally distributed, which we know it is not. We need something that's going to measure income inequality in a country. Welcoming to the stage, the Gini Index, which uses a score from 0 to 100, 0 being perfectly equal income, 100 being completely unequal income. Brazil in 2001 had a 58.4. And people, just so you know, that's incredibly high income inequality. But in 2020, it dropped to a 48.9. So it dropped almost 10 points in 19 years. That's really good. However, ranking Brazil globally, along with all the other countries in the world, this puts Brazil, their 2020 score, as the 17th worst level of income inequality in the world. And that's a statement for a BRICS country, people. But money isn't everything as far as economic development goes, or as far as political development goes. There are other ways we can look at development, like human development. Welcoming to the stage, HDI, the Human Development Index from the United Nations, which measures countries from 0 to 1 based on life expectancy, average years of schooling, and GNI per capita with PPP. And Brazil in 2000 had a 0.685. 2019, a 0.765. So getting higher, which is a good sign indeed for human development in the country. It means things are moving forward. But let's break down the score for Brazil. In the country in 2019, life expectancy was 75.9 years. Average years of schooling was 8 years. And GNI per capita with PPP was 14.2K. And as far as HDI rankings, this puts Brazil at about number 84 globally. So a lot better of a ranking than that Gini score, for sure. But what about political development indicators, How's things been in Brazil politically lately? Well, let's turn to first Reporters Without Borders, looking at countries' level of media freedoms, scoring them from 0 to 100, 100 being freest media. Brazil in 2022 scored a 55.36 out of 100, which puts Brazil at number 110 out of 180 countries and territories ranked. This is interesting, so it's just below the halfway mark of countries and territories as far as media freedoms. But let's look at Transparency International, looking at perceived levels of corruption in a country and scoring countries from 0 to 100. Brazil in 2021, 38 out of 100, and ranked number 96 globally out of 180 countries and territories. So, right around the halfway point again, as far as levels of corruption. Now, let's look at one last political development indicator, and then talk about what everything means together. So Freedom House, which scores countries from 0 to 100 based on the levels of civil liberties and civil rights in a country, basically telling us how democratic a country is or is not. Brazil in 2022 got a 74 out of 100, which is a free rating. And it puts Brazil at number 77 out of 210 countries and territories ranked by Freedom House. So in the upper half of free countries in the world. But what does all this mean? What are all these numbers really telling us? And that's the right question, people. They're telling us how a BRICS country is doing in the world today, and also telling us why Brazil is in fact a BRICS country. Brazil has one of the largest economies in the world, full stop. As measured by GDP, it is one of the richest countries in the world, full stop. Thus, Brazil's a BRICS country, no longer developing country. But looking at all the other data, we see that a lot of the economic success isn't reaching all of the people. GDP per capita is low, income inequality is high, and the country is yet to rebuild its economy to the 2011 status, where it was $1 trillion larger. Brazil has come a long way, but still has a lot of work to do. And their HDI, their media score, their corruption score, and their freedom scores all point to a quality of life and a quality of democracy that many countries in the world simply do not enjoy, if not most countries in the world. Brazil has been on the up and up for a while, and these past 22 years has most certainly moved them out of developing areas category. And our data show just that. Now, do our data suggest Brazil has more work to do? Of course. It's almost impossible, as well as unreasonable, to expect any country that they can go from being developing country to a full developed country in the snap of the fingers. It's just not possible. It takes time. And let us not forget, all countries are still developing. No country says, okay, time out, everybody, stop, please, stop. Oh, we're good. We don't need any more things or any more money. You can just go home and take a break for a little while. That doesn't happen. All countries are trying to grow more and more. But what's next for Brazil, and how are they going to do moving forward? Well, a lot of that depends on who's the next president. Brazil has a presidential election on October 2nd, just over a month away. So eyes open on Brazil, people. Lots going down real soon like out there. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in Brazil today. Check us out tomorrow for Good News Friday. And it's not a cliche or a catchphrase. It's a lifestyle. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Pickering, signing off.